honestly, like if I have like a genuine interest, it's probably in the nuclear delivery systems of the 1960s, like the Convair, the Hustler, the B-52, and I look at the F-105, the Thunder Chief, that was kind of supposed to be a nuclear bomber and was kind of pressed into a role as Wild Weasel. That era, I think I've read 2 books about that. I am really fascinated about the early air war days of Vietnam, where you're dealing with dudes who were some of whom were still around when they went from the transition of propeller planes to jets. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
When you think about it, there was once a famous picture of a Grumman of a Tomcat, an F-14 Tomcat, flying next to a Grumman like Hell whatever plane, one of those Navy planes that they use as a torpedo bomber.
Yeah.
And there was 32 years between those planes. And you're like, wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And it went from one of these little, torpedo bombers with a little spinny propeller to an F-14 Tomcat that has missiles that can go, 60 miles, 100 miles, Phoenix missile, something like that, and radar systems on board. That was 32 years. And now you fast forward to today, and the F-16 is as old as me. And it's pretty much still looks like the same F-16. I'm sure all the electronics were ripped out and they put new electronics in it. But it's still the same thing, and maybe we've kind of reached peak fighter jet, whereas like we kind of know what works, So all the innovation is going in towards stealth and battle management systems. In fact, one of the reasons that supposedly I think they call it the T-7 Red Hawk. I might be wrong with the designation, but it's the new trainer that's replacing the T-38s. They manufactured this thing to be have the systems that are similar to the F-35, because airmanship is very important, don't get me wrong, but what's really important is to teach these new flight officers, teach these new pilots how to manage all of these systems and situational awareness while you're dealing with a computer, you're basically a flying computer, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's kind of interesting. But the one of my favorite things to read about is those early days of Vietnam, the early 1960s, 1963. There is I've read a couple of books about the F-105s in Vietnam, and specifically Wild Weasel. I forget the darn name of the book now that I think of it, the Wild Weasel book I just wrote. But like in the beginning, just that would make a great movie to me. Just how we figured out, like, there was this one SAM battery. I want to say it was in 1963 that destroyed an American fighter, and it was Russians that were operating the equipment.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
They were demonstrating it for the Vietnamese, but it was Russians, right? And, in the span of less than 2 years, we figured out how to develop radar warning receivers that gave primitive directional capability, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock directional capability. And we also figured out how to create anti-radiation missiles that would home in on the particular signal of they call it the Fire Song radar. Now, Fire Song, I think, was their anti-aircraft radar. I forget the name of the radar that was used for the SA-2. But we figured out how to create missiles that would home in on that particular signal. That was the Shrike missile, which wasn't all that good, but then it was replaced by the Standard missile.
Yeah.
That era, I probably gave you an answer way longer than you expected, but that era, I think, is absolutely fascinating because it was kind of the beginning of the whole one-upsmanship of tech. Okay, you have surface-to-air missile tech. I'm going to invent another kind of tech that'll ride that beam all the way down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to strap a jet to my butt, and I'm going to take off, and I'm going to bait you into turning your radar on.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Yeah, just imagine being in combat and standing up and going, "Hey, over here,
take
over
a look."
here!" That's essentially what those wild weasel guys were doing.
Yeah,
So I think that's probably the one part of history that I like the most.